And hello, welcome everyone. My name is Fabrizio Scrolini. I am the Senior Director of Programs here at the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. Today, this morning for me, I'm joining from Montevideo, Uruguay, to actually introduce this amazing event, this celebration of our 15-year anniversary, and definitely a great moment for the organization. We are really, really thankful for all the colleagues that are joining now today. And please do share with us on our chat from where are you joining this morning, afternoon, or night. So we get to know. Here we are celebrating from Liberia, Sudan, London. Amazing. Hola, hola. There you go, Paul. Our colleague Paul from the Netherlands. There's a great audience now coming in. So we're really, really thankful for your presence this today. So as you know, we are going to host a dialogue between two very esteemed members of our community. But before that, I guess a bit of an intro on how we got here. Like over the last 15 years, we had significant and important and devastating events, like from technological and communication breakthroughs to a global pandemic. There has been no shortage of landmark historical happenings um, where we have been affected globally. It is interesting to think that no matter what happened, like the whole community has had a role in identifying how open data and open source tools in the hands of the most affected communities can have a direct impact in facing these challenges, one of the most pressing challenges of our centuries, whether it's about disasters, whether it's about climate change, gender inequality, health emergencies, and more. And I think it's all based in one of HOT's key premises, as one of our speakers today recognized from the early days of HOT. There's an overwhelming impulse to help when people are suffering. And this connected as well with, tools and the evolution of our interconnected as well society, a society and communities that care about and cultivate open source knowledge, allowed this movement to flourish and grow to what certainly was not expected in the early days. Like from the creation of the open source tools to becoming an audacious project, one of the landmarks in terms of HOT's evolution. The journey, of course, had been challenging, but also the collaborative spirit allow the organization, the community to keep momentum, to keep moving, and create amazing connections around the world. So today we are celebrating every mapper and every validator and every tech developer and every government and every NGO and every partner, first responder, staff member who can actually contribute over the last 15 years to help expand and to help build this movement, this organization, and most importantly, like to help people to have access and control on geospatial information that shapes their lives during the most pressing times, during the work where crisis happens. So instead of keep talking, like I will love you to hear from two of our most distinguished community members, two of our distinguished people that are playing a significant role and play as well a significant role in setting up HOT. So you will be hearing today from Rebecca Firth, as HOT's executive director, and Mikel Maron, HOT's co-founder, and as they interview each other and share some of the memories, some of the challenges they face and the journey, some of the cherished moments, and we keep moving in the evolution of HOT. So just to introduce Rebecca, who probably many of you know, Rebecca holds a degree in geography from the University of Cambridge and has worked across sectors, continents, from disaster reduction in Japan to public health in Peru. Before becoming executive director in 2023, she served as HOT's senior director of strategy and program, leading initiatives in partnerships, communications, and community engagement. She also led HOT's successful proposal for the Audacious project and played a key role in expanding HOT's global footprint. And we also have here Mikel, who co-founded HOT, having started the development of the idea of OSM in disaster response in 2005. He currently leads product and operations at Earth Genome, focused on geospatial, AI, and design for climate and nature. Previously, Mikel was the community team lead at Macbox and a presidential innovation fellow at the State Department in the Obama administration. He has been deeply involved in OpenStreetMap, serving for many years on the OSM Foundation board and pioneering use of OSM in community development in Mapkibera. So as the conversation moves along, I will encourage all of you to share your story here with us in the chat. And also at the end of this conversation between Mikel and Rebecca, we will leave some space as well to pick some of those comments and potentially also engage in questions and sharing that you want to do in this event and with our speakers. And with that, I'm very excited to hear what both Rebecca and Mikel have to share with us today. So without further ado, let's begin the conversation. Welcome, Rebecca and Mikel.
Hey, thanks so much for introducing. Hi, and happy birthday to all of us. So happy to see so many people here from all parts of the world and also from all parts of HOT's history. People who got involved right at the start, people who've gotten involved just in the last few months, which is just amazing. Yeah, in preparing for this event, I've actually been feeling very emotional about the collective hours invested in HOT over the past 15 years and thinking about, like, that must be millions, tens of millions of hours that, you know, everybody on this call has put into HOT in some way. And I know Heather, who's here, is one of the people who inspired me very early on in my journey with HOT to kind of acknowledge that, like, any hour is a positive contribution. It doesn't matter if you're mapping, validating, responding to an email, answering a question, developing HOT's next strategy, like all of that contributes to the bigger mission. So yeah, I'm so happy to be here today, marking the big milestone of 15 years and kicking off the next few months of celebrations. As Fabrizio said, really would love it if people chime in with their reflections too. The best thing about HOT has always been co-creation, dialogue, bringing people from different parts of the world together to do very unlikely things, and thoughts and perspectives are critical to that. So as me and Mikel are talking, we would love it if you have kind of different thoughts, different reflections, add those in the chat. Hopefully we can bring that out in the Q&A at the end, talk about it a bit more. But yeah, with that, we're going to dive into a little bit of a kind of retrospective, wandering through HOT's last 15 years and thinking about what's next. I'm happy to be talking to Mikel, someone I've always looked up to, learned from, mostly agreed with, sometimes argued with, all in all, always had really like productive and generative dialogue with about what HOT is and what it can be. So we wanted to kick off by just reflecting a bit on both of our stories with HOT. I'm going to start by asking Mikel to intro us to your story in HOT and give us as much detail as possible. You probably were involved in the pregnancy stage of HOT, like pre-15 years old. So yeah, we want to hear it. Give it to us.
Yeah, I feel like it's my baby sometimes, and like like with your kids as they get older, you still kind of think of them as that, and you're surprised at how they make their way in the world, and when other people meet them, their own perspective. So it's still surprising to me, to hear all of the and to see everybody's like everyone's story, because you think of it one way, you think of it as your baby, and yeah, it goes back about 20 years for me, and I think with like a lot of people, it's deeply personal and about connecting with a motivation to not feel powerless in the face of the some very often overwhelming amount of trouble that we either for those of us who are lucky are only looking at it from far away, and many of us are directly impacted and have seen it up firsthand with it in our lives. I saw the helplessness during Hurricane Katrina, with people stuck in that stadium and bridges out, and no one really seeming to have any idea what was going on. And I felt immensely troubled with the Southeast Asian tsunami, the void of not knowing what was happening, but knowing that there was this devastation on a fundamental scale. And at the time, it connects back to what feels almost so idealistic and I don't know, from another time when the internet and the connective technologies had the potential to really change how we work together and how the world functions. I was a really idealistic believer in the web. I was in college when the Mosaic browser was released, and made web pages, back in like 94 and 95, and really thought that this was going to positively change how we were all working with each other. And I think that's right, but it's also I think we've seen that the entirety of like the troubles and complexities that human beings bring to everything has made its way into our information systems as well. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Back to the start. So I seeing there were people doing really interesting things right then in 2004, 2005, without any of the standards or access to data or access to code or community existing in order to assemble geographic information for response. I remember during the Southeast Asian side, folks scrambling to like locate satellite imagery, process it, put it in a format that other people could use. The same with Katrina. Very janky messaging systems. The kind of stuff that now is like, it's amazingly, the processes are amazingly smooth, as much as can be frustrated with how fast things go with the distribution of imagery and of data. Nothing existed back then. And there's also a time when someone like me, who has no formal background in humanitarian response or disaster response, can be overconfident enough to think, oh, maybe this could work. And this was at the very early days of OpenStreetMap. I was living in the UK at the time. I was making stuff with maps. I encountered Steve Coast and Tom Carden as absolutely like flabbergasted at this idea, and that was very exciting to me, to see something just so improbable, so unlikely to ever actually work. And it didn't work. It was cobbled together. I was a coder, and so there was a lot to work on right away, and I was excited about maps on the web. This was also pre-Google Maps. I mean, if you you still say it, and it's still like, is this actually going to work? You get millions of people around the world to contribute to a database. No one's in control exactly, and somehow you make the best map in the world. I mean, all credit to Steve for. There's a lot of people who were thinking about such things, about combining wikis and maps back then. and but they were going off in a million directions. And Steve has a very strong personality and very strong took leadership, and you need people like that often. And he brought a lot of threads together of people who were just trying to make maps of things because maps were expensive and inaccessible. Thank goodness the Ordnance Survey was charging so much money for things. Otherwise, we wouldn't have OpenStreetMap. It was just a very fortuitous moment where I don't, just a few years later after Google Maps, I don't think OpenStreetMap would have existed. So the timing was impeccable. And then for me, these major disaster events, just, I was searching for something, honestly, like personally, I was searching for something which could lead to the things that I really, I love to play with tech and data, and make something that actually mattered to people. And that's what I saw, an inkling back then, was that this was possible. And that resonated with other people enough to get into that crazy idea. You asked me to just go and start. I can talk about this for for several hours, Rebecca. So I'm just going to pause because you direct me what else would I should get into.
A really good up until the origin of HOT, but obviously the last 15 years, your role both within HOT and the OSM ecosystem has evolved, grown in different ways. It'd be really interesting to hear a bit how do you see that HOT has grown up in that system?
Oh, amazing. Yeah, because I think originally it was very much there was a complete overlap with people who were already involved with OSM, of thinking of it was a small enough community that everyone was involved in everything. And it was very much, we hadn't actually figured out the practice of how to do response and how how you would have to adapt OSM to meet those situations. The kinds of translation and engagement you need to have with responders, so different. That's where I'm I can't believe that there were people who were generous enough to hear me out, who were serious about disaster response, in the 2007, 2008, 2009 period, because they could have easily just said that is crazy. But I think they understood that there was there were serious problems in information management. But you had to learn how to speak that language and translate it. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think one thing you've touched on actually connects really nicely to almost my entry point to HOT, which was you sort of identified there was OSM and then there was HOT that was kind of within that. Everybody that was in HOT was somehow connected to OSM prior to that. Perhaps not everybody, but for the most part. Which means one really critical thing, it means that they were mappers. And they might not have understood the humanitarian system, but really got the OSM system. For me, when I came into HOT, it was at the launch of Missing Maps, which was in 2014 in London. There was a launch event for Missing Maps. And I think that was a really interesting moment, because that was when a bunch of people who were not mappers came into HOT. And on the one hand, had a lot of energy and support for the mission, but also were a bit what the hell is this about all of the kind of tech and the processes. And I just couldn't believe the first time I tried to talk to someone and I had to download Mumble, and I was this is the most absurd technology I've ever found. It breaks. I've got $1,000 laptop and I've just turned it into a walkie-talkie. I can only talk if I push one button. None of the other functions of my laptop work while I'm using it. And it worked so well for that setting and what HOT was and where it came from and the kind of origins. But to kind of a new person coming in at that moment, it was kind of a confusing experience. And I think one thing that's been really interesting about the 10 years since then has been managing to branch into new spaces and places to kind of meet people where they are, rather than before it was kind of HOT had a way of doing things and you had to go to that. And I think the intention to say, how do we go to everybody and how do we be in all those spaces at once and acknowledge that that's a really high overhead, and it's really hard to do that, and you can't do it perfectly. But it's been, I think, kind of interesting seeing like the different people that have engaged since that thing. R.I.P. Mumble. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I'm really curious about that,
sad
because
to not have to download that again.
I thought we might have first met, I may be wrong about this, in Ottawa, like in the 2015 timeline. And were you facilitating a missing map sort of strategic session?
Yes.
Am I right?
Yeah.
And
2 days in the Canadian Red Cross office before the Hot Summit in Ottawa. Yeah.
so, I mean, you said that, some of the, I guess, outside also of like the technology and the sort of the technical practice, what were the hardest things to kind of wrap your head around this really oddball community of OpenStreetMap? What was the thing where like the last time you're like, oh, now I understand what's going on here? I mean, I still have those kinds of things happening, but it is just it's a very hard thing to. I still don't think a lot of people who don't know it well actually understand how it works. And I'm like, did you have any discoveries along the way, or like, that was more important than I thought it was?
Yeah, for sure. And it's like an embarrassingly long story, actually. So my intro to HOT, interestingly, so the Missing Maps launch event in London, somebody in the organization I was working to was invited to that and wasn't able to go, so just kind of forwarded it onto someone who also couldn't go, who forwarded it on to someone else who also couldn't go. I think I was like 5th in line. And I was like, yeah, sure, I can go to this. And then the day came and it was raining so hard all day. And literally the whole day I was like, oh, I'm not going to go. And I was like, oh, I should probably go. I was like, oh, I'm not going to go. I was like, oh, I should probably go. Got to like 5:55 p.m. and I was like, okay, I'll go. And I got there and it was so sweaty. There were no chairs. It was like the hottest room I've ever been in. There were a lot of like core old hotties there. Nick Allen was running the training. Ralph was there. Andrew Bray, Pete Masters, like running this kind of big launch event. I didn't manage to save anything. It was just like a series of misses, but I left it being like, this was incredible. Like, I have absolutely no doubt that this is something that can completely change the world, but it needs to be like opened up into like the systems that can use it. And it was kind of really interesting because like I've always felt like I have none of the skills to get something from 0 to 10. Like that first like initial piece, like the people that did that, like I often feel like have that like standing on the shoulders of giants experience, and like because maybe I came from like a slightly more professional setting than like much more like I was a business consultant before, so it was like much more like management consultancy style. And actually it was kind of interesting seeing like if the thing this needs to do is like scale and grow. It was kind of for me an amazing match because it was like I got to work on something that was so interesting that I just deeply believed the world needed, but that kind of needed that like catapult into like bigger systems. And obviously I think most people have been like generally supportive of that sort of trend and seeing the kind of growth of HOT in that way. But one thing I just find so interesting is like it's such a story of near misses for me. Like I nearly missed that first event, which like my life has been fundamentally changed by going to that. And then a job came up at HOT and I only saw it like 2 days after it closed. And so I wrote saying like, would you still accept an application? And it was a little confusing. And then anyway, finally managed to apply and then got that job. But again, like twice, I was like, oh, I nearly like didn't get through this door. But in order to apply for that job, like I thought HOT was missing maps before then. I'd been volunteering for missing maps. I'd been running mapathons with so many people. One of those events had like 1,000 people. We did another event, like 50 mapathons in one day. And I just thought HOT and missing maps were the same thing. Like I didn't understand why I was going to tasks.hotsm.org. And before applying for that job, I called Pete Masters and I was like, what is this HOT thing? And we spoke for an hour. And at the end of the hour, like, I hate to say it, but like, I still didn't understand. I was like, I'm really not sure what this thing is, but like I'm still, something like kept me in, and I still applied to it. And yeah, kind of since then, it's obviously just been like the craziest journey, because I've worked for Hop for like 8.5 years, but like in that time I've had 7 job titles, 2 babies, and 3 country moves. So it's like sometimes I feel like I've worked at Hop for like 9 months, because it's like it's constantly been new and changing and like something new all the time. There's been no year that has been consistent. But I think also maybe everybody feels like that, because it's like we're always going into new countries, new use cases, new technologies. Like there's like the one thing that's always been true is that everything is changing and everything is new, and we've been lucky to be able to define like what is innovation in our setting. But yeah,
it's so important to have a means to hang on to that, where like the vitalness is somehow is held onto and transported through time, and you can draw on, and it is, this is, I know you have worked so hard on this, the challenge of like, how do you build structures around that can also provide enough sustain to the people who are really like are so involved in the bigger community. That's there are so many moments, but there's like very circumstances where everything, just the things lined up and the right things were at the right time. There are also plenty of moments when things could have completely fallen apart, like it was not not easy to keep it going, and to balance this tension between this really like vital, very like motivating movement, and people just wanting to contribute and amazingly having the means to do so, but then providing the structures to facilitate that. And I tell you, like, when I don't have an exact moment where I can pin on it. I mean, maybe it was when Tyler came on, where it's like, phew. The moment when it's sort of like, I guess when you're, I know Hot is 15, but I felt like, maybe at that point it's like, oh, going off to college, like that. I was like, okay, some responsibility is sort of like with I felt very deeply, personally, I felt like I got ulcers at some time, like the amount of like this need, like how important it was to put time and energy into it. And I was so relieved when I could hand that off. And now, like, I feel, it's, I mean, even at that point, it was distributed among many people. But that was a beautiful thing. But it's still, I like, I think it's good that this is an ongoing challenge to adapt and make sure understanding what Hot is, because it's very easy to ossify and just kind of do the thing that was, especially in this in the sectors that we work with. Can I just change topic completely, or I could just I was curious, like, it must have been such a thrill when like Audacious came together. It's like you get you got an email or a call or whatever, and they're like, yes. I mean, that's amazing. And then you're just on these stages and interacting really with a world that hadn't been in touch with Hot, with OpenStreetMap before, and I'm sure there was a lot of excitement, but I guess also just kind of sticking on this thread of like, what do people think Hot is, and what was the thing? What do you think is then, and maybe even still, the nux of like that confusion or the challenge of understanding what OpenStreetMap and Hot is about?
I think I have reflected on this a huge amount in the last few months, and I think it's because it's like the thing Hot is trying to do and the way in which we're doing it now is incredibly complicated. So like the top line of Hot is so easy to explain, right? It's like there's missing data, people are going to fill that data, like, most people in the world grasp the value of data and are like, that, that sounds generally helpful. But if you go like one layer below that, it is incredibly complicated, right? Because it's like we're trying to bring together local governance, communities as in like residents who are living somewhere, communities as in like the open source community and like youth engagement, and also like a free and open source tech system. And I think like generally people understand HOT based on like the door they knocked that got them into it. So like if they came from an open source tech background, that's their kind of like starting understanding, and then they're trying to connect to like, what is this international NGO? Whereas if they came from like a local government, they're understanding it totally from that background. It's like kind of confusing having to like collaborate in the other spaces. And so I feel like this kind of your personal journey into HOT is like a real indicator to like what is going to be easier or harder. But I think it's like, as we look forward, like the problems we're trying to solve are like the most complicated problems in the world, and they need incredibly complicated data to fix them. It's like, you know, if you want to do like meaningful urban climate adaptation in an informal settlement, like there is a reason people haven't done that already. It's because it's extremely hard. Like we've already done the Millennium Development Goals. We've already done the $1 vaccines. Like we've already hit the low hanging fruit. And the stuff that's like left to do is really complicated, which is great for us and our business in the sense that like our information is going to be a game changer to that. But it's really hard because it's like the problem in this settlement could be the intersection of governance with a changing climate, with like loads of market failures. And it's like we're just like one piece of a jigsaw puzzle to fix that, but we are one of the fixable pieces. Like there's other things in that jigsaw that like are not ready yet. And I always say, like, HOT is ready. Like, we can put this piece in place and just improve the picture. And like, the more we can do that, like, the more impact we're going to have. But it's like, you know, I often think, like, we've talked in the past about like the community in a very simplistic way, a very generic way, as like a monolith. We've talked about like the ecosystem around the map without really defining what that is. And I think like what we haven't managed to like clearly communicate well is like all of these different actors we're talking about are like cogs in a machine, and if HOT can turn that cog, like the other ones start moving. And we see this in our projects over and over again. Like a local community does something amazing, that's like one turn. The government picks it up, thinks it's really cool, that's another turn. Someone else comes in to fund it, that's another cool turn. Then somebody else starts using it, and you get this like ecosystem around the map. But we have found it challenging to communicate like, what is that? What is our role in it? And how do we get it to happen over and over and faster and faster? But I feel like we're sort of getting there in terms of being able to articulate that maybe at like a cleaner level moving forward, because of the fact that like hyper local data everywhere is what's needed to actually solve a lot of the problems of the future. And like big pat on the back and well done to this community for like the huge amount of like remote and base data that has got to that point. But almost, I think, being able to say, okay, moving forward, like this is the information that's needed, and this is how this like very complex community of communities, as Heather just put in the chat that Kate was saying, kind of comes together, is really important, because like the bigger we are, the more people, like the more confusing it is if you don't describe yourselves well.
The world is confusing. People like the way that our all communities work is confusing. No one, you know, there's centuries of political science. No one. The world itself is more and more complicated. And I think, yeah, I always saw data as an entry point and as a lever for something else. And that question of like, so what, and what happens next, and who is involved, I think is a critical thing. One of the philosophical underpinnings of OpenStreetMap that really got me excited was that anyone can contribute. And of course, anyone, as we know, is making that real has been a lot of what HOT has pushed forward. That's not straightforward, and that's a big confusion point when you think about like the connection to the traditional open source communities, and that that the usability of contribution and using the data. But what excited me, and what I still think is a challenge, is the going from being able to create data to being able to use that and have an effect. Now, the thing that's amazing about it is incredibly empowering. Like being able to act directly the edit map, and maybe that was part of like what you sensed when you went to that first meeting. Is like, oh, these people in this room are doing it. I could do it, possibly do it too. I mean, and that I think gives people who may not have ever been in that position before a taste of what it means to participate and to be a part of something. And alongside like hyperlocal data, I think part of the reason why I think like the world still continues and it's more and more challenging over time with the way that like the internet is starting to and the web are starting to develop under the impact of AI systems and the most most valuable corporations in the world, is that ultimately the thing that needs to happen is that individual people in communities need to be taking part and be a part of these discussions. It's not, that's one thing I think is still very confusing it's confusing in my work on climate and nature. I think it's confusing with OSM Hot. It's like, yes, the data, if great, you have a data result, but like, who is that data going to?
Yeah.
What are they doing with it? And I was like, well, the people who collected it should be the ones that are doing something with it, because they know they have the best idea of like what kind of how decisions are going to impact them. And that is still such a challenge because you are faced with even more and more complicated governance and power system coming back at you that are now, I mean, information systems are the site of like mimetic warfare right now. Like just the way what data itself is, I mean, especially with the amount of fabrication and bullshit that can now be generated with AI, is being able to just speak truth is an intense challenge.
Like one thing we've talked about a lot in the kind of mapping ecosystem is like the role of AI in disrupting map creation, which like personally I think is not the right thing to do with AI in map usage, because we are like not far away from like a lot of kind of basic GIS-y roles being completely disrupted, right? Like if I put into ChatGPT, like make me a map of all the coffee shops in London or whatever, I can get a really, really great product with exactly the information I want, like all the relevant things to what I need, because obviously that map data is great. Like now, if I put that same prompt and I say like, show me all the like maternal health facilities in Senegal, I get like a weird broken overpass query, not like a great usable map. But it's like that is going to be completely game changing for us, because the barrier to entry to use data will come down very substantially if you don't need to learn QGIS to do it. And I think that's going to be really amazing in terms of the like increasing data usage. Is like, we have the potential to like massively scale the number of people that can actually like get their hands on actionable insights quickly and without having dependencies on other people, which I'm really excited for. Like I think that's going to be a big, it doesn't seem like the tech is like quite there yet, but I think like we will get there, and that will be like really game changing for our impact.
But there's no, like it is, it's not a straightforward story to say that yet behind all of these very sophisticated models is human data. Like it is classic garbage in, garbage out, it is, I think that fundamentally, like machines are going to be, they're going to be fundamentally limited in how their ability to like understand what is happening in the world. There is always going to need to be a need for humans to interpret. They can make the job a whole lot easier, but there's still this there is so much fantasy going on, especially and I've seen it for years in geographic map making, that like, oh well, you can take the people out of the equation because people are complicated. The world is complicated, and the machines reflect that. And it means, right now and into the next 15 years, it's why I think HOT and OpenStreetMap are so important, because there are very, very few things that, come from that that period of time, those early more like idealistic days of the internet, that still are really so based in enabling people to do things, and there's certainly like a lot at risk.
And I think that's always been the thing that Hot has been known for, and is still known for, is like boots on the ground, like local data literate communities that are able to meet the moment of whatever is needed, whether that's a disaster, whether that's a development project. And that's always like the special thing about Hot, and the differentiator between Hot and other solutions is like, if Hot folded tomorrow, all of this would still exist. Whereas, you know, your typical like geospatial mappy startup, like if the company goes down, like everything's going to go down with it, which is the difference. But yeah, I would love to pivot for a moment. I want to hear something personal. I want to hear about like, tell me like, what's your most treasured memory of Hot? And other people, please put yours in the chat as well, because it's been a delight to read these comments coming through.
Okay, well, there's a lot, but I guess the first thing that just occurs to me is because it was just such a amazing moment. What, like the morning of the Haiti earthquake, as Eric and I were traveling back to Kenya, we were we're visiting around some, you know, taking some long stops through Europe, and we were actually in Dublin. And I woke up early because I was jet lagged, and saw the news, and you know, we'd never faced anything like that before in so many ways. And I know, I put the call out in the early hours. I spent the rest of the day visiting Dublin, but in the early hours, put the call out, started to, like, you know, jump on IRC, get on Twitter, and see what could happen. And I guess it's like amazing that you know, that the people were seeing the same opportunity and answer the call. And so over the course of several days, I'm like waking up at like 4 a.m, scrambling to help with you know, just to get, it's not like we had nothing, we just had OSM, but just to kind of help keep people oriented. And it was happening. So that was amazing. And then, you know, I think like a year later, you know, actually going to Port-au-Prince and seeing firsthand like things happen, like it in use, like it was suddenly a reality. That's a really, of course, there's a lot to say about what's happened with Haiti since then, but at that moment it was maybe, you know, it felt very optimistic what was happening on the ground, and seeing how data was being used right then. It was very special to be able to like go, you know, see things in person and not just through a screen. And then, like I said, also feeling Tyler coming on was great. I was just like, okay,
big exhale.
Yes, yeah, it was definitely what I think for many of it, a big exhale of like, okay, we kind of I don't know if Tyler knew what quite he was getting himself into at that moment.
Maybe he can share in the chat. That would be great to hear. It's so nice to hear everybody's thoughts coming in. Also, Chan, like really mirroring, that's like the same experience of managing an earthquake response, but like 13 years later. And I imagine in like very different circumstances, because obviously I know that was based where you live. But yeah,
I couldn't
really,
imagine. I was, oh, sorry to interrupt. I was just thinking, like seeing the Kathmandu Living Labs and like seeing them literally like emerging out of the rubble and like setting like their setup, like their outdoor sort of command center was incredible. I could not, like, this was the sort of like feel like the that was a moment, was like kind of the realization of what we had been building. It's like, oh, this is being driven from folks who are right there, and they have what they need, and they're leading that activation. That was sort of the, you know, and I'm just reflecting now. Doesn't it feel weird sometimes to like feel so happy about such a like terrible situation, but there's like these like these beautiful like gems of hope and optimism within them, and that was just like, I couldn't, to say that they were okay, and then there they were working, and they were the center of it, that was incredible.
Yeah. Oh, I had just commenting that same experience as well, which is so nice to hear. Yeah, I always think there's like, it's like after a disaster, there's really only two things you can do. Like you can donate or you can map. Like that's it. And so I think it harnesses like that energy that people have in a crisis in a way that it just kind of draws people in. And I think like you mentioned earlier, like you think of HOT as your baby, and I think I've heard a lot of people say that. I also have felt that, like, and I think it's because it is kind of like a choose your own adventure. It's like HOT is like, here's the system, here is the tool, but like you can do what you want with it. And whether you're leading that or helping someone else who's leading it or designing a new piece of the system, like there's that like ownership that like it's built by the people that do it. And I feel like it's, you know, that phrase like success has many parents, but failure is an orphan. It's like that's sometimes where I feel like, what is a success? Like a lot of people feel like ownership over this, and that is like resilience and a sign of like a positive trajectory. And like it doesn't mean it's easy. Like we are like a total organization of the future. I think we're like facing a lot of the challenges and questions that like any organization that is trying to bring together this many people from this many different backgrounds to do like really hard stuff is going to experience. But it's like that kind of passion and commitment and like ownership is there, which is what kind of enables people to like feel that like this thing needs nurturing and it can be nurtured by me, which is like a really important part of this kind of movement.
And there's, you know, you referred to this, like it's, you know, a community isn't a monolithic thing. There's healthy debate. There's sometimes unhealthy debate. That's normal anywhere. Think about like the neighborhood you live in and like how what things people disagree with. And finding the space for that, for people to really shape it, is super hard. It's because there's and this was a source of a lot of the stress in the early days, like where, you know, there was a lot of different ideas about how this was supposed to work. And so you have to have this sort of, I don't know, ability to make decisions and ability to like consult. I mean, I think this is where the kind of the distribution to the regional has been such a great thing, exciting thing to see, is that there's a kind of lightweight structure that can kind of manage to balance those things so that the things can be applicable and run locally. And yeah, I mean, I'm at this time, especially, you see, like, you know, we just moved back to Washington, D.C. There, USAID, with all that. Like, you see these traditional institutions. We already knew they were shuttering. I mean, we already knew that like the institutions of the 20th century were not up to the challenges that we're going to be facing in the next decades. And now that's accelerating. And I think that there is something about how HOT and OpenStreetMap work that is more fit for what's coming, but it doesn't make it. I don't. You can catch a breath. You can rely on each other, but there's always a challenge ahead to adapt. And I'm very excited to see kind of what happens next. What's going to happen next, Rebecca?
It's a very good question. It's an important question. I think like one of the ways I have always seen HOT is like from right when it was founded to 10 years from now is like walking the line from like the satellite imagery to seamless local data. And there's many steps to that, right? Like there's I know there was field mapping done at all elements of that journey, but like the level of effort to do it is what like changes, and also the range of options changes. So it's like, I mean, like now we're doing loads of really amazing drone work, for example, which is like bringing a kind of typically high-tech tech in a low-tech way. And I think like HOT's future is really about, like the biggest question for us now is how do we establish a sustainable business model for both HOT and local communities to keep doing that? Because obviously the question of like paid work in OpenStreetMap, the question of like who is like who and how is kind of either paid or incentivized to map has been like a really, really big one. But I feel like in the moment we are in now, where we have a massive restriction in global aid, quality of life, cost of life declining in almost every country, the argument that like local data can be procured without funding is weaker than it ever was. Like if you subscribe to that argument, it is a harder one to subscribe to now. And I think HOT has like a real opportunity to say like, hey, like OSM communities and other kind of adjacent communities have grown really meaningful skills in a really wonderful way, have created a really high quality baseline, and building forward from that is actually creating something that like payers exist for. Like people like, this isn't a philanthropic kind of argument necessarily, like creating ever increasing like layers of detailed data for a specific person, like that's something that people are used to paying for. And I think like HOT as an organization, like our role is in making sure that we can meaningfully capture that, distribute it in a way that people feel that they had genuine like power, ownership and growth of their livelihoods from it, and that the kind of community and or organization grows around it. And on the kind of 10-year level, like if we can do that well, then I think HOT does start to become one of those organizations that is doing what every NGO says they want to do, which is like work themselves out of a job. And I go to meetings like pretty much every week where someone says that they're going to do that. And not once have I ever heard like a meaningful example of how someone is doing that. But like for HOT, like if local communities can take on more work locally, which I believe means they will need to be paid to do that for the most part, then like over time, like once that system is working in a scalable way, HOT's role does actually become more of a platform provider, more of a kind of tech QA, maybe innovating new methodology. But it's kind of interesting because in some ways for me, it kind of comes full circle to some of the like earlier arguments about what is HOT, like what should it be? Like I think there were some people that thought it should be a formal NGO, and there were other people who thought like people should be able to use it and do what they want with it. And the interesting kind of thing for me is I think like actually we've been able to leverage like a huge amount of philanthropic money, time and energy to turn this into something where actually plan A is not like what was that plan for some people actually could be the future in a scalable, meaningful way. And we're kind of fulfilling both sides of that argument there. But it'd be interesting to hear like, yeah, how I know you were around for some of those debates, so yeah, it'd be interesting to hear how you reflect on that.
You absolutely have to have both. You absolutely have to have both, and that's I think HOT and OSM are like in the better position than ever to achieve that. I mean, I'm still fairly involved and not in like a formal board member way. Thank God with the OpenStreetMap Foundation, and what you've seen there, just it is starting like. It is not anathema to think like, oh, we are the OpenStreetMap Foundation is paying people to help maintain the infrastructure. Grant was hired. We've got great support. Min came on to be the facilitator. We're hiring soon a maintainer, coder for the core infrastructure, and it's not a big debate anymore. That this is, I think it's, but I think what we've been able to figure out, and I don't think it was straightforward, is like, yeah, you can do both. You can be passionate and be supported to do it. I think you've just seen that's just a sign of like things of experiences over time. A lot of what's kept OSM itself going were like people who had a position within a corporate environment, many different corporate environments, and they got to do what they loved, but from different dimensions. I'm really worried about the corporate environment right now, to be honest. Like its attention to OSM with with a lot of things going on and with AI, but that I'm so relieved that that's not a fundamental debate. It doesn't make it easy, but I think as long as yes, people, especially in places where you have this is what we discovered very early on in Map Cabarrus. I said that like these if people are going to take part in this, they have a choice between mapping or doing something that's going to put food on the table, like but those the people I think it's also about like cultivating the people and bringing people in the community who really do feel that passion about it, and then the means to take part may come and go, but there's I think one of the other things that's been so great is also just like encountering individuals and see kind of their growth in the face of opportunity, and then also they're just like pure passion for the fundamental mission, and so that's keeping that very personal and human motivation at the core, while also recognizing that you have the structure. Well, that's going to be the ongoing magic, I think.
Yeah, that actually connects really nicely to something that John just put in the chat about like the interface between top down and bottom up, and I feel like is kind of getting to a point now where I think it would be fair to claim that we're like bottom up at scale, and I think like that's like the magic thing that we need to be able to like push really hard. It's like it's like either it's top down and then people in theory it's scalable, you can get more money, or it's bottom up on grassroots, but then no one's going to give that enough attention. And I feel like we're kind of getting to that point now where we're able to be kind of bottom up in a scaled enough way that it is able to like get more attention, get more visibility, be in spaces where you have high level political advocacy, things like that going on in a way that like 10 years ago would have been a joke. Like people are like, why are these guys on this panel, and I think like we're actually kind of getting to that space now, which is really exciting, and is a bit of it's a power to the people. Like this is a model that, like, as you say, shouldn't have worked, and it got a few lucky breaks, and here we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I know that we need to start moving to a bit of Q&A in a few minutes, but maybe in just a brief moment, what is your baby? You've seen it grow for the last 15 years. What is your birthday speech? What do you want for it for the next 15 years?
Oh, goodness. Well, I think just picking up on some of the things we've talked about it's never abandon, never not taking the easy road, I think is a key thing. That's how it's gotten to this point, and staying again, like stay connected to the original motivations for why we all got involved. That the spark of what's exciting about what we're doing is needs to be continually cultivated, and don't that's the most precious thing, and I think that especially in a world which is just a swirl with more and more things which feel meaningless, like really feeling something meaningful about the work that we do is That's such a special thing if you can figure that out. That's a lot of people go through life do not feel that way, and I feel very, very, very lucky that been a part of things that have connected that up, and don't, you know, even and also I think it's good, you know, the other thing, you know, for all of it is to is also to the letting go, you know, like I think that, you know, you can't I think so many I hear Heather's voice in my head as well, just like, you know, we also need to take care of ourselves, in this very, like, we're talking about how, you know, planet, you know, scale important hot is. That's also a lot that's very exciting, but also that's a lot to take on. So also go easy on yourself, and also give yourself a break. You're only person, you know, only human after all, and it's not all on you, and it's not all on your decisions. So you know, feel, you know when you need to have space as well, and find a new way.
I love that. I sometimes think about, like, you know, when you're thinking about, like, HOT is already like an organization of the future in so many ways. Like, we're grappling with like so many of the kind of complex systems that are going to be more important as, you know, organizations become more digital, become more global. But like the kind of the sector that we're in, which is sort of slowly crumbling, combined with the complexities of the world, which are anything that happens in the world is reflected in an organization. Like that's true wherever you are. You know, it's really hard. But then sometimes I think if I'm looking to the future, then I'm actually really trying to think about like a 2050 projection, if we're already like in some ways kind of ahead of the curve. But I really hear what you say. I think it's important that HOT remains courageous and keeps that like innovative spirit, that it's like, you know, we defined in 2022 when we redid our strategy with the voting members, we defined our organizational role as a catalyst. And to me, one of the really important things about like how you implement that isn't that you like design innovation processes that, you know, catalyze. It's that you just find people who themselves are catalysts and you give them the resources. And that's, I think, like the thing that we need to do and to grow and get better at is like, you know, not going towards your kind of professionalization of innovation, which like in my view, like I don't really think it works in general, but I especially don't think it will work at HOT, and go towards the like, okay, this person has a great idea, like what do they need, and try and kind of unlock things that way. And I feel like, you know, I hope that we'll be able to do much more of that, and I hope that HOT will always be a place where like humans and technology meet. Like I think that's always been the thing that has been wonderful about HOT, has been getting that balance between people and tech. And I feel like it's one thing that has always inspired me about HOT is how I think it's using tech in the way tech should be used. Like it's not starting with the tech and saying the tech should be this. It's like people decide what they want to map, and then like the tech will help them do that, which is the opposite to like if you learn any sort of data in a like Western university, it will say like, here is what good data looks like, now make that. Not like, what is your problem, what information do you need? And I feel like that kind of role and like making sure that like tech has the appropriate role that it should have is really important, because it's easy to get distracted by like a funder wants to give us some money for this thing, and you know we don't have enough money for something else, so we have to accept it. And like there are really difficult decisions you always have to make, because like at the end of the day, like you're trying to make a budget in a scenario that seems like it doesn't want to let you do that. But it's like that's the thing I think we have to like dig our boots in over. It's like give humans the role that they should have and let tech serve them. Anyway, I know that we are coming to the end of our section. I think that Fabrizio will be joining us again. And as if
here we are. So I was actually, you know, in this journey with you back to the early days. I was fascinated by the stories you share. As you kickstarted this, like I can only imagine the early days in Haiti. Also, while you were sharing this, there was a flurry of activity in the chat about early memories from people. Like I cannot even start telling them because they're so like so intense, so different. Like it's like everyone has a story and remember the precise moment where they engage hot one way or another. Like for some of them were, you know, in a malaria project in Africa. For some of them was using a map where they were serving another institutions. For some of them was in an obscure basement at the local township of Montevideo, where nerds were actually, you know, like releasing open data, as it was my case. So the variety of experiences there is just fascinating. And it was also fascinating to hear from you about like the evolution and the importance of the human element here, and also like the challenges we face in terms of making sense of the current state of the world. Like I guess that's something that came out really strongly out of Mikel's narrative as well, was about you know, like to some degree also taking care of oneself, like making sense what is happening today in the world and how we can actually get meaning, and how lucky is this community actually to have a sense of meaning, to have a sense of doing something that's actually contributing. It's not normal business across the world, and so it's a moment of, let's say, gratitude, whether it's through luck, through determination, or through both, that people encounter something meaningful to do in life. So that's also fascinating. And then of course about the future, I think you both made like really good sense of where the organization might be heading. But in order to head somewhere, you need to, you know, sustain yourself in the roots. And so I think that that was like the interesting arc of the conversation, like where the organization is coming from, where it is going from, the challenges that's now faces as it scales. um, and so I would like just to you know, like to open up the space for people to, you know, ask questions. Like there's a lot of contributions here, like from, actually I would like to acknowledge the current and past board members. Like some of them are like here in the chat making very insightful contributions. And so please do leave your questions here, or if you want to contribute, by all means, raise your hands, and we can, you know, we can include you. There's one question now here from
Yeah,
Bernard.
I think if people want to come off mute, by the way, I
Yeah.
think I'm right in saying that can happen. So if you wanna say something, then just post a comment in the chat, and Fabs can bring you in.
Yes,
Well.
exactly. Like, so if you feel like coming off mute, don't be shy. So there is one question here from Bernadetta Chami. So how has Humanitarian OpenStreetMap changed the way communities respond to disaster and climate challenges over the past 15 years? Some of that was addressed, but if you had to take um, one or two ways in which HOT has changed that, what would your take?
I think I'd give two things. One of them is that I think now it is the default expectation that HOT and OSM data will be there. So kind of back when Mikel and others were sort of doing the early earthquake responses, you know, that wasn't, OSM data was not like a default part of the workflows of the humanitarian system. And that now is the case, right? Like we have our data during a disaster is updated on HTX every hour. We know that literally thousands of people are pulling and using that information. And we see things like in the Turkey earthquake, I think we saw even there was like a video of a doctor saying like, I am using this map to literally like find affected places. So we see that like real time, like immediate expectation that it's there in a way that was not the case 15 years ago. And then I think also increasingly lately we've seen that the investments that we have made in trying to grow local communities around the world. Now, I mean, unfortunately, the places where we've been doing that are also places with high risk of disasters, and disasters have happened. So we saw, for example, in the Myanmar earthquake, like that was a really undermapped area. The Open Mapping Gurus program that the AP hub had been running, the Asia Pacific hub, had already, I think it was 6 gurus in Myanmar. So as soon as that happened, like, yes, we had the global response, but we could also connect that to like local people who understood the data, and we can meaningfully support them to be part of that response. And similar in other spaces, I think the Turkey-Syria earthquake was another great one where there was a really strong local organization, Çesenler, who had a lot of members very kind of able to respond, and HOT's role as a support role to them. And that is, again, something that kind of, obviously it's not an even picture. Communities aren't the same all over the world. And when a disaster happens, like local community mappers might be affected by that disaster and therefore not able to respond. But we are seeing that there have been spaces where that has happened, and that's really cool, because that's one thing that kind of was always part of the method from the beginning, was that could happen, and I think we're seeing that happen with increasing frequency, which is great. But Mikel, what would you add to that?
I don't have anything to add. You basically said the things that I would say. So yeah, particularly that the expectation is there by default. So.
So yes, great. So while we wait for more questions, please don't be shy here in the chat. I guess this element of expectation, like somehow people are now expecting on OSM, but you both refer to the kind of sustainability quest for this. So OSM is there. Many organizations, including private businesses, are actually using OSM to build on that infrastructure. So how, one of the challenges I have, and others probably are having, is how do we make the case for this brilliant human infrastructure that's now in place, to get sustained by all these players? And I know probably you've wrestled with this over the years, as particularly Mikel, you have been on the OSM board, you also, of course, set up the beginnings of HOT. So as you both actually have moved through this challenge, what are the lessons we are learning? What are the cases we need to make in front of this large community, basically say, okay, there has to be a way in which these expectations meets reality, and quite frankly meets the level of investment we need to keep it going. So that kind of let's say yes, problem challenge we collectively face with others in this OSM space.
We need new stories of the minute of what's happening. I think it's always the most resonant thing to ratchet up the attention of what we've done has always been stories of how things came together, and we know that it's remarkable. And sort of when there's, I think part of the challenge is when there is a big event, then that story is elevated and we be part of that story. But now those things happen all the time and they barely make it different, and there are challenges all over the world. So the that's one thing I wish, especially for the next, immediately and in the 15 years ahead, is I guess facilitating more really genuine, impactful storytelling by by this community. I'm struggling with this right now at work. We're a small organization, but even us, when we write something up, well, there's a tendency to want to perfect it, we edit and everything. And I think I'm trying to figure out how to get us to think about, we really learning and sharing in public and openly. That was a big part of the early days of, it's how OpenStreetMap has kind of always worked. And a big part of HOT was our entire everything, how we organize everything we planned was all in the wiki, was on mailing lists, and then we were, Twitter was a thing back then, and blogs, and it was a lot easier to get attention to things. But there was just an element of putting it out there, and putting it out there unvarnished, and doing it in a way that really feels authentic and resonates with people. And I think to me that's the only, you can't rely on the same stories over and over again, that people hear them and it's like, move on. So like, how do we like cultivate that kind of, that kind of practice on a wide scale, and then elevate and really like find ways to explain what's amazing about what we do, with something that's like very fresh and directly relevant. And that's no easy task, but I think it does come with sort of like letting it flow, just like with OpenStreetMap. Edits flow. And I think finding ways to get, we're reading these stories right now in this chat. Excellent. What about for the rest of the world? I think that's the way you capture attention, is we have to figure out how to authentically tell it how we see it.
Yeah, I have actually I really agree with everything you said, but I think there's something else that I'm thinking of as well, which is in the current environment, like one thing that has been interesting is I think HOT has actually seen kind of an increase in demand, which we are very fortunate about, right? Like nobody wants to, like I do not want to profit from the radical curtailment of global aid. However, if the world has to do the same amount of work with 60% of resources, it really pays to make sure you're making the right decisions. And I think we've seen that in demand from our partners, that they need their programs to be more efficient, more accurate, more targeted. And to do that, they need data. And the cost of that data is low in comparison to the cost of the resources that they're spending. And I think, at HOT, we've always had massive high metrics, right? We're mapping now to 1 billion people. We have 750,000 people who are doing that. And then we've had really great case studies. Here's this amazing project in Guatemala that did this thing. Here's this amazing project in Congo that did that thing. And we haven't really had the middle layer. Like we haven't been able to say like, here's what our health portfolio looks like. Here's what our disasters portfolio look like. It's been really hard to get that data because all those projects are so discrete and so specific, and they don't really roll up in a neat and easy way. And we never had enough people in M&E to do that anyway, even if it had been possible. And so now we're in this kind of interesting space where I think like, actually, when you look at our programs as a whole, we've been thinking about it in terms of data created, and we haven't always been thinking about it as like value unlocked, and could think about like, what is the dollar value of decisions that were taken on that data? What is the efficiency gain in that program because of that data? And I think like we have some early data on this from projects over the last few years, and the ROI is really good, right? It's like we think between like a 1 in 50 and a 1 in 150 ROI to spend money on data, which makes this like a really good decision to do that. And I think like part of our task about, as we look at like kind of the past and how do we like leverage this moment in time and how we make the case for HOT and local community data moving forward, it's providing data at a radically lower price point and a higher quality, and kind of being able to demonstrate, okay, if you spend this money on data, here is the gain that you're going to get in your project. And if we can do both sides of that so that we can get the kind of, system working together, then like, I think we'll be in a really happy place. But obviously we're doing that in a time that is very disruptive and shaky. And so, I think kind of the argument for HOT is extremely clear. Like the logic makes total sense. And like, I think the systems are in place. The question is like, can we do it in a world that's vibrating? Like, stuff is getting cut all over the shop. The organizations we're partnering with might not exist tomorrow. Some of our partners might be closing off their operations. Like, it's hard to you sign an MOU with an organization, they don't exist the next month. Like it's hard to do that in a space where like the system is vibrating. But I think like we've got an excellent idea, and if we can prove that like ROI of the data, then we'll be in a really strong position to say, okay, like this is what this asset can do for the impact of your work at a bigger level than just volume of data created. And I think that's like a really, really important thing for us to crack in the next year or so.
Great. So we have, go ahead, Miguel, if you want to.
Oh, no, I was just saying that's great.
Like I got two questions now coming. One slightly more technical, one slightly more, let's say, complex. So I will throw it at you and see how can you deal with that. Like, one is about our work, and particularly the data that HOT collects, and particularly in disaster recovery or disaster management efforts, and essentially implying that it's a long process, often several years. And so, does HOT have any policy or practice to keep the planning data in HOT spots up to date for a few years after each crisis? How essentially data quality and sustainability of data work in our current operations? That's one, let's say, more technical, more in the weeds question. Now I got another question, which is like, let's say, a bit more heavy, which is more about, like, as many governments in the world are, like, across multiple countries, are to some degree waging war on organizations and services that build collective truths, from public health to essentially news. Organizations that provide verifiable third-party data are to some degree under attack. What threats is mapping facing in this environment? How are we and HOT meeting these threats? So I guess this is more about the, let's say, changing political environment that we are dealing with, and the fact that some organizations that are to some degree, fighting for establishing truth, something that Mikel also referred into his conversation, is now essentially affecting the mapping world. And if it is affecting it, like, how do we, react to that or respond to that? So I will leave it up to you, which one you wish to answer. Like,
I'll
do you want to go first, Miguel?
yeah, okay, sure. Actually kind of related reflections on both. I think this, I'll actually answer that. I think there's a key technical challenge that would be really good to focus on, whether within HOT, but within the broader community as well. Is like, we've talked about this for years, like the transition from you having a greenfield empty map and then going into the keeping that up to date over time. And in some ways, I still think the tooling that we and the product affordances that we have around OpenStreetMap are still not well suited to that. But I don't think it's a mystery, the kinds of things that you might need, and those things certainly exist, but they are not like front and center and mainstream. I think you can imagine modes in the ID editor where it's more about like, oh, what are things that might have gone out of date and need, should be verified or there's other, you could match things with Street Complete and others. Certainly the entire experience of the pandemic and so many businesses closing was a kind of a reminder of this. So I think that is something that should require some focused effort from across many actors. And I'd love to see more attention to that. And it also, the other side of maintenance, I think the issue of vandalism comes to mind in response to John's question, because I think maybe, OpenStreetMap is in somewhat a unique position in this regard, because ultimately we are talking about things which are verifiable in the world. As long as OpenStreetMap itself is probably reflective of that, then we're in good shape. Problem comes when we're not, and when and there have been both I think verified and sort of anecdotal instances of OpenStreetMap itself becoming it's happened a source, particularly like in Israel and Gaza, like a source of a place of conflict itself, for conflict's sake, not for the sake of making the map better. And there could also be intentional changes done within OpenStreetMap used to discredit it as well. And I think that's will be the vulnerability for our approach. I think we've done very, very well so far, but again, I think the scale at which we operate, the tooling that we have around this problem needs to evolve, and we need to think about, well, how do we really think the amount of work I saw like the operations team put in to combat all the waves of vandalism over the past year. We need to be thinking of new ways of handling this, which doesn't compromise kind of the fundamentals of what OpenStreetMap is about. And so, yeah, I do think those are both. There are technical challenges that sort of underlie both of those, which I think need more attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would very much echo those. On the data quality side, like the keeping map up to date side, I think also one thing we're very aware of in building a base map is that a lot of that base map has been built with the best available satellite imagery, which may already have been from like 5 years ago. And so a lot of the locations where we've been mapping, especially urban centers, like even if we map it based on that freshest imagery, it's already extremely out of date when we even start. And I think that's one of the reasons we're very passionate about integrating like the low cost drone work to our offerings and services in a scalable way. And the team has done a lot to kind of build the drone tasking manager that does what the tasking manager does, but for drones, like enabling people who haven't flown a drone before to all do that in the same place and get the network of the whole city. And I think like that has to be increasingly part of our workflows. Otherwise satellite imagery, like it's important, but you know, we don't have ready access to high quality, up-to-date imagery when we want it, which means we have to get that in another way. And this is one way we can kind of keep doing that in the on the ground projects. And I think it's really important that that's part of our strategy. On the threats side, like, it's a big one. There's a lot of different like ways to take that, and I think like especially in our sector, like it takes years to build a reputation for good quality data, and it takes like a second to lose that. But somehow that seems to not be true for AI. Like if something is good with AI, people think it's good, and if it's rubbish, they're like, oh, that's just AI, like let's just improve the training data, in a way that like, you know, they actually don't think about organizations in that lens, and it's really frustrating. And I think like a lot of we're seeing like organizations with loads of resources who go around the world talking about their great damage assessment model or their great imagery availability, and like it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. Like they have a lot of budget to share the work, and actually sometimes the kind of quality of it isn't what we're hoping, and we find our work is at a lower cost producing better information. And so I think like, you know, we're always going to have like that David and Goliath thing when we're working with a big corporate, and we do need to like stand our ground and show the counterfactual to that. And I think like on the ethical side as well, like it's really important. Like I think our ethics framework is really good. Like it's detailed, it's complicated, it's thoughtful, and it's more thoughtful the more complicated the situation is. But it's really important that we use that to say no. And it's not just a default yes to every project. And there have been a few cases in the last few years where we've either not mapped, or we've mapped extremely quietly, or we've mapped quite quietly. And I think that's like a really important tactic for us to use, is like, you know, how can we meet the need where it's possible to, but also if there's spaces where we shouldn't be working because we can't be convinced that that's a safe thing to do, then we shouldn't do that because the risk is greater than the known benefit. And yeah, I hate to say it, but we have to build our operational resilience. Like as an like we're based in the US. We're fortunate that over the last few years we had made registrations in many other countries. So we have like 6 registrations in 6 other countries, which is really important, I think, right now, with kind of everything, you know, every few months there's a big flare up about executive orders and what will that mean for nonprofits, and will we be able to continue? And I think like, you know, behind the scenes focusing on our operational resilience is critical. And I'm really grateful that I think we have both staff and board members that are really thoughtful about that. Like the agenda of the finance committee yesterday was making sure that our bank accounts are, you know, not inadvertently supporting organizations that are taking a role in Gaza. And, you know, I'm glad that is what our finance committee is discussing. I'm glad that we have people who are able to sort of take global problems and translate them into every part of the operations of our business, not just like the work we do. But that's hard. Like it takes so much time, and it's really complicated. And, you know, it's taken us like what is this, 5-6 years at this point to try to launch our entity in Europe. Like these things, you know, they take a lot of time, but I think it's really important for HOT in the stage we are with the world as it is, that we have that operational resilience to be able to adapt if something major happens in any one of the countries where we're very dependent. So yeah, there's a lot behind that, but it was a great question, and it's really important, I think, that we keep getting ideas and suggestions as well. Like all of the things we've done have been via suggestions that have come through the community or partners or different staff members as well. Yeah, keep them coming.
I mean, like, it's been an excellent discussion, like some answering of tough questions. No, there was no ducking of these questions. Like, so I appreciate both of you for taking a stand on both. As we are now essentially on time for our engagement, I basically would like to say thanks to all our audience here, to all the community that came together to celebrate the 15-year HOT. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Mikel, for all the work you have done in the past and you keep doing and you keep engaging, as well to your current efforts, Rebecca and the team. And I also like to remind ourselves that in this world, like, we are still facing, of course, very critical situations like the one in Haiti, like the one in Gaza. And unfortunately, from our side, we get to do something about it, whether our efforts like are large or small, but we are still there, like trying to support, trying to make an impact, trying to make the case, not only for the use of data, but actually for that to serve and to support basic human needs that are often ignored. And in doing so, also creating a community of people that share values, that share practices. And essentially, I think that's what HOT has been doing, as Heather is saying over there, like convening these spaces, like generating these synergies, like to drive the use of data forward. I guess as you are both saying over there, HOT is all of these people together doing marvelous things over the years. Now it's now 15 years, as I think Mikel put it at the beginning of this, a quinceañera in Spanish term, like it's a coming of age, if you wish, like for another stage. And so I'm really glad as well that we had this opportunity to share and this reflection on this 15th anniversary. And we'll keep you posted about the next 15. So thank you very much again for joining, and have a good evening, afternoon, or morning, depending on where you're joining today.
Bye. Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
You all are great. Bye.